Just want to do a video here on my air compressor system I just put in my shop. There's good videos out there, but just wanted to kind of run through kind of some of my decisions and some tips or tricks when doing this that I thought would have helped me. So anyways, start here at the electrical. So I actually ended up having the electrician run an RV plug. So the red piece, or sorry, the orange piece there is a adapter coming out of the wall. So it takes it from the four-prong RV plug to just a standard welder cable. So then I just purchased a welder extension cable to use to actually wire it up to the compressor. I went pretty heavy gauge. I think if I had to do it all again, I wouldn't go quite as heavy gauge, but just kind of depends upon what you're looking for there. The main thing that I found was when you go to wire it inside of this box here, there's not a whole lot of working room in there. So if you get really heavy gauge wire, depending upon the compressor you get, you might have a bit of trouble working the wire in there, but I still prefer heavy gauge when I can. So anyways, got that wired up. I ended up going with a Husky 80-gallon air compressor. To be honest, I don't know how much I'm going to use this air system, but it can do basically all the air tools out there. So I felt comfortable going with that, and I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money. I like the Quincy's and other brands out there too, but figured I'd start with this here, and if I start using it a lot and if this fails, then I could spend a little bit more money. But I was honestly more concerned about getting some nice plumbing and other things in here versus the compressor, or at least for now. So anyways, went with it. Coming out of the outlet on it is a 3/4 inch fitting, so I just put a shut-off valve in there. That's the only shut-off valve in the system. I didn't really want to add any more. It's just more spots for leaks and more places that you have to splice into the plumbing, so just adds a lot more to the installation also. I also sat the compressor on some vibration isolation pads. You can find these on Amazon, eBay, whatever. Pretty common. I did find some that these were a little bit bigger. I want to say they were like 6 inches by like 3/4 inch thick. There's some out there that are a little bit smaller, a little bit thinner. I thought these were pretty good to give it a little bit more of a footing. I might end up putting this into the concrete like you're technically supposed to, but in all honesty, that compressor's not really going anywhere, so I don't know that I personally will. I just don't like drilling into concrete, but that's totally up to you. So again, coming back off the compressor, you usually want to use a flexible hose. So that's a 3/4 inch hose. The main thing here is I tried to keep everything the proper diameter so you don't have any restrictions in the system. I don't really know how much I'll be using this system, but I wanted it big enough so if I ever do go to even some really large impact tools, I would hopefully not have to change anything. So the idea was to kind of do this once. So stuck with the 3/4 inch line there, and went to a regulator that was an also 3/4 inch regulator. That's a common place that a lot of people end up choking down their systems, so I want to make sure you go pretty big there too, or at least stick with kind of the same size that you decide that you end up needing. This one does self-vent when you back off the regulator, so that's a nice feature to have too. So main purpose of this, really is I just wanted something to be able to set the pressure. So I will need to go to each location, to hook up an air tool and then come back here to set the proper pressure. But I don't have a regulator at each one of my outlets or manifolds, so I'll use this to to set the pressure here, but shouldn't be that much of a hassle. And then of course it has some filtering in there to catch some of the water or particulates, so should work good. Got a drain on it. The main thing I liked about this one is it had a metal bowl on it also. Some of them are plastic. That just kind of, I don't know, I think the metal's a bit better. So coming out of there is the Maxline tubing by RapidAir, so 3/4 inch here also. I found this tubing, it's actually, I really ended up liking it in the end. I was a bit skeptical, because it's a aluminum core flexible tubing that's all coiled up. So, you can buy an expensive straightening tool. But in the end, I ended up actually just running it through a big long piece of PVC pipe as I uncoiled it from the really tight shipping coil that they do, and that worked really well. So that was a 1.5 inch piece of tubing that or 1.5 inch piece of PVC that I used while pushing through the 1/4 inch Maxline, and then I would actually reduce it down. So I went to from 1.5 to 1.25, and then the 1 inch PVC pipe is almost perfect for the diameter of the 3/4 inch Maxline tubing. It's close enough that you really kind of need to use like soapy water to push it through. But in the end, I ended up finding out that that's actually a little extreme. You can work this stuff by hand once you get it up, so get it halfway straight, and then you can work it by hand. I also ended up using that long piece of PVC pipe so that I could straighten some of these longer sections here going up the wall. What you could do is just stand on the ground and just kind of whack the tubing, and it'll straighten it out. It's kind of amazing how you can kind of work the tubing. So that ended up working out pretty well. So ran the Maxline tubing to my first manifold here. In terms of getting these links right, it's a little bit tricky, but in the end I didn't have any problems. I just hooked the tubing up to one end, and then cut it close to, say, this manifold here, and then just put the fitting in there, and then laid the tubing close to it. And then you can take this big nut off here, and you can see where the actual inner portions of the fitting end. So you can make a marking and add just a little bit to make sure it gets inserted all the way inside of there, and didn't really end up having any problems. So worked out pretty well there too. This manifold is one that I found also from RapidAir. It doesn't come with some of their kits, or at least the Maxline kits. This is a 2-port manifold, but the main thing I like about it, or why I used it here, was it's got ports coming out of top, bottom, left, and right, whereas the other ones that they usually provide in the kit does not. It's just kind of top, bottom, or out the back. So again, this one's top, bottom, left, right, and also one coming out the back if you're doing a in the wall type system. So kind of the pain here is mounting these. They made them just wide enough so that it's a little bit bigger than the stud that I'm using. This is a metal building, and these studs are actually a bit bigger than a standard 2x4. So if you're going to 2x4, it's going to be even further out, so you won't have a good spot to mount it. So I just made me kind of a cheap steel mounting plate that I screwed to the wall there, and then screwed the manifold into it. So for my system, I put in a bunch of hose rails. So the first one here, this one's just down by a workbench here, so that's where I'll run air tools off of it. Again, kind of ran into an issue here of trying to figure out how to mount this. So I ended up seeing some Super Track, I think is what they call it. It's usually in the electrical section at your home improvement store, but this is the heavier gauge. It was a 12 gauge Super Track. So these are pretty rigid, so this is really kind of overkill, but again, there was really no good way for me to mount this hose reel unless if I had something like this, or would have had to have made another plate of some sort and then figured out how to attach it. But this worked out pretty well. So the hose reels I went with, I did a lot of research on these, and I ended up going with a company called Global Industries. I had never heard of them before, but they seem to get pretty good reviews. The main reason why I went with them was they were one of very few and the only reasonably priced one that actually kept all the fittings 3/8 of an inch. So I adapted out of the manifold here. These are 1/2 inch fittings coming out of the RapidAir system to the 3/8 inch hose here. And again, they maintain that 3/8 all the way through. So I really like that. The other thing is this type here, you know, all of your actual air line is external. It doesn't go through the center shaft of the reel, so that should make it a lot easier to service if ever need to. So I like that style compared to the other ones. But again, the main thing was that they kept 3/8. Even the end of the hose coming out here is 3/8, even though, you know, a lot of people are going to end up using 1/4 inch tools essentially. But at least it gives you some other options to get some higher flow rates out of these. Another thing that was really nice is this NPT fitting to connect it to your air supply. This is a male at the end of this hose here. So screw that in first, and then down here on the other end, they actually put a female. So I'd seen a couple mentions on different reels that like they put two males and non-swiveling connectors on it, so it's really hard to attach those, or at least it makes it more difficult. So this was easy. That's a swivel female and then a fixed male NPT fitting, so it was easy to get up there. On the end of the reels here, I ended up going with the RapidAir push connect ones. I've never had these before, or any push connect ones, so hopefully that'll make it a bit easier, but they were reasonably priced, and so give those a shot. This reel does have, I guess the only thing I kind of maybe would have preferred it to have would have been a double arm on the reel, but then I also kind of realized that that's just going to make it that much harder to adjust the feed angle if you need to do that, and or if you go to service it. You know, that's that much more stuff you're going to have to take off of it. It's going to be that much heavier to lift it up there. So really these are just to feed the hose in, so you really don't need a whole lot of support, or at least I don't think I will. So I guess that's the only negative that I could find with this reel, but they seem to work good so far, but I haven't used it much. All right, so that's the hose reel. So let's go back to my plumbing here. So I went from this manifold up to a T, so it goes up into my roof from here, but branching off of here, did a fairly long run to what will end up being a air supply for a car lift. So it's a bit awkward to get these longer tubing runs done in the Maxline. Even though you get them nice and straight, when you go to lift a 20-foot section like this, it's gonna bend anyways. So you still have to do some straightening once you get it up on the wall. So that's why I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't obsess about how straight it is too much, because you're gonna have to work it once it's up on the wall also. So what really helped was the included mounting brackets. I really do like the ones that they provide. I'd even gone out and I didn't think I would like them, so I purchased ahead of time some metal straps. And the metal straps, you'd have to do 2 screws, so and it would completely wrap around the pipe. So I kind of quickly realized in playing with this that this style was nicer, in that for one, it's only 1 screw, and then the tube just snaps into it. So if you need to make an adjustment or whatnot, then you can just pop the tube right out of there, do some bending on it if you need to, and then snap it right back in without having to undo everything you just did. The other thing that I was kind of shocked with is these seem really, really strong. I had this whole entire 20-foot section hanging off of just one of these at one point, and had to kind of bend the tube up, so I was just waiting for one of them to snap, and it didn't. So they hold up pretty good. The only issue I kind of ran into with them for me is these steel tubing that they use, it's a pretty thick gauge steel tubing, so I have to use at least a number 10 screw on these. Actually, a number 8 I think is what I ended up using on some of them, but it was a special screw that I had to use, and the head on it was still too big. Yeah, it was a number 8, and the head was still too big for the hole that they drill in the center of these clips. So I just took it over to a drill press and just reamed out the hole just a little bit, and that ended up working pretty good. So I did pre-drill them, then used a number 8 screw. If you're working with metal buildings or metal tubing like this, I guess another tip that might be useful is, again, I kind of had to try multiple screws to find one that would work with this thick a gauge, but also you want one that has a fairly tall head on the screw, so that you can still use a self-tapping type screw. I had to pre-drill them, but when you have a bigger head, it just holds onto the socket a bit better. So for that last bit of drilling to widen out the hole a little bit was just a whole lot easier if it kind of sticks into your drill a little bit better. All right, so from there, back to the T here. I went up into the ceiling to an elbow that's way up there. So these are, it's up about 15 feet. So it's a little bit sketchy on a ladder up there, but I was able to manage. As you can see, it's actually really nice that this tubing is bendable, because I had to kind of transfer from the front edge of these metal tubes, to the edge of the rafters is what I went to. So if you had the fixed or hard plumbing here, that would have been a little bit more tricky to do that. So it's nice that you can just bend this tubing. The reason I'm kind of keep mentioning this is I know there's a lot of people out there that are, just don't really want to do the Maxline because they want to get perfectly straight tubes, and I was thinking I wanted that too, but in the end here, I'm actually really glad I went with more of a flexible tubing so I could work it, and in the end, I got it pretty straight, and I can even go back and work this a little bit more to get it straighter. So went up into the rafters, again, using the clips across here, and went to about the middle of my building. It's offset a little bit intentionally, but to another elbow here, and another bend there to actually go up on top of the rafters now. So here's one of the normal manifolds that's included in their kits. So that's just a 1-port manifold. So I use the top port to connect the hose reel in there. And then again, I connected this to the Super Track, the heavy gauge ones. The thing that's a bit interesting here is, that's a lot of weight to mount up, 15, 16 feet tall when you're on a ladder. So I have this one here, and then I continued down my garage and I put a second hose reel down at the end here, and then these drop down. So anyways, what I found to get these up there was it's actually a pain to kind of get these hose reels mounted to begin with. Nevertheless, if it was hanging over your head, trying to do it above your head, essentially. So I ended up mounting these on the ground to the super track. So to lift it, you're looking at probably, I don't know, 50, 60 pounds at least. It felt a lot heavier than that. But so what I ended up doing was just, I threw a rope around the rafter here, and then hooked some clamps through the super track, and then I would just lift it a little bit, and my wife actually held the other end of the rope. With the rope wrapped around a rafter there, it actually kind of acts as a brake. The rafter acts as a brake, so you're not going to be able to lift it up like as if it was on a pulley, but I didn't want to use a pulley because then you got to kind of support that weight. So again, a rope wrapped around it, and then just somebody holding tension as one person lifts up, say a foot at a time. Makes it pretty easy to get it up high, and I was able to do that using ladders too. So got it up there. It's just going between the two rafters and then screwed to the top of the rafters there. The manifolds that came with the kit worked well for how I did this too, because it's got a fitting that comes in the front and a fitting that goes out the back. And then again, I put the fitting for the reel went on the top, and on the bottom is your drain line. So here's the reel. This is actually a bit bigger reel. This is a 50-foot reel. The other one was a 25-foot reel. So again, came down to the quick connect here. So kind of back to some more tips that I'm thinking of. Basically a lot of connecting this Maxline stuff really is just kind of follow their instructions to the T. There's a tool that you have to insert into the end of the Maxline after you cut it, which kind of spreads the end of it. And then also it's got blades in there that'll put an angle on the inside of the tube. So you want to make sure after you twist this tool inside the tubing that you clean up any debris or any edges, and get it as flush as you can when cutting the tubing. So when you slip it over one of these fittings here, basically there's two O-rings on that fitting that it'll slide over. And then I kind of found you'd slide it over those two O-rings, and then if you gave it kind of another harder push, it wouldn't snap, so to speak, but it almost, you just felt it kind of plunge like another 1/8 inch. And I think that might be kind of the trick to get those fully seated on there. But the other thing they tell you to do is to use some, it's an Oatly brand pipe sealant. So you put tape on, and then also this Oatly compound on it. So I went with exactly what they had pictured there. So it makes for, I don't know, not the prettiest of install here. You can see one where I did versus one that I didn't here, just because I kind of forgot on that one, I think. But it's more of like a Teflon type material that it dries into, rather than like a dry paste. So I actually really do like this stuff. It does lubricate it a little bit more to make it a little bit easier to get your fittings on there. But the nicest thing was when I did this whole system, I had zero leaks. So I did lean on the fittings pretty good when tightening them, but I think that this liquid sealant too is probably helping a pretty good amount to get this truly sealed up on first attempt, because I don't know how many connections I have, but it's a whole bunch, and to not have a single leak worked out well. So I think that's about all that I can think of here. So hopefully this helps someone, particularly if you're doing it on a metal building, or looking to maintain large diameters throughout. It's kind of nice. Everything is truly 3/8 to the end at the smallest, and then the manifolds have 1/2 inch fittings and 3/4 inch tubing going to them, so should be plenty of reserves here.